Welcome back. You're watching Roundtable and we are with Mr. Satis Arnold. He's also a higher education policy expert and also the team leader of ADB funded project Education for Knowledge Society project. And we are tonight talking about climate change and adaptability of Sri Lanka. So we were just speaking about adaptation. Speaking of which, Satis, I just wanted to ask you what is our adaptation capacity and how should we develop our adaptation capacity?
Yes, well, I mean, it's the big thing that I guess is a challenge for the coming years, and we need the guidance from the state, from the government, and I noticed that the present government is probably very aware of this matter, because if you read the preamble to the Mahinda Chintana 2010, the single preamble in the Chintana document says this: this earth and its vegetation is yours, but they should be protected not only for your benefit but also for the benefit of future generations. A ruler is only a temporary trustee and not an owner of your children's heritage. So this is profound for its significance for Sri Lanka, that we have a leader who talks about intergenerational equity as the central guiding principle for his major policy document. So that's excellent. I think that it shows that the government is very aware of the long-term need for justice between the present generation and the future generations, which is a key issue with climate change, because the adults who live today may be gone by the time climate change really bites, but the young people who live today, they are going to have to deal with it. So we therefore need adaptation that can help the young people for their future. If climate change is unavoidable, then we have to learn to live with it. And as you're asking about the strategies, well, I mean, for example, water. There's some really good scientists in Sri Lanka who've been doing a lot of work on agriculture, a lot of work on water. I noticed Sohan Vijayasekar at Morotu University, some paper he wrote about a strategy for water, very detailed thinking, and Dr. Punyawardana from the Natural Resource Management Center in the Department of Agriculture, done a lot of work on agriculture and various other issues. So we have some very good people here who could develop this strategy once they're empowered, which I'm sure they are being empowered now to develop.
Now, what are the priority areas when it comes to adaptation? Like once you just referred water, but what are the priority areas that the government also should look into when formulating their policies?
Obviously, shelter, tremendously important. Now, during the recent very heavy rains in the southwest of Sri Lanka that we had in the last few weeks, shelter damage was a very big issue. There were hundreds of thousands of people who became homeless, and the government was feeding people for a while, I understand. And so always poor people are more affected because their shelter is less protected, and in more vulnerable locations, they are more flood prone. So protection and planning shelter for the future is a key issue for the future. And we are an island nation with a lot of coastal area, 1,500 kilometers of coastline, and the coastal areas are going to be inundated with climate change due to storm surges that come with sea level rise and so on. So we have to plan our coastal belts carefully. How do we protect our shelter, our homes, then our infrastructure, our road system, railway system, our seaports, our important monuments and buildings. All of this infrastructure needs to be planned for protection for the future. We had to think about food, agricultural production. The dry zone might get drier, the wet zone is getting wetter. And so how do we deal with food security? How do we develop food reserves? Do we get new varieties of seeds that are more resistant to climate change? And if you do this smart, we could become even more plentiful than we are today. And we may be able to, in fact, exploit that opportunity.
So now always we tend to see climate change as a threat, because rightly it is a very grave threat. But now looking at what you're also saying, I just want to find out whether climate change can be perceived as an opportunity to maybe drive economy forward. That is a climate change giving us a platform to experiment with new markets and maybe products as well?
Absolutely. Every threat can be turned into an opportunity. And it's just up to us to how we go about it. There are countries like Germany that's developed a lot of renewable technology, energy technologies, which they are now exporting to the rest of the world. And similarly, California is doing the same thing. And there is no reason at all why we cannot develop some really clever ways to adapt to climate change, which will be of great value to our other countries in our region. And we may be able to export our skills, not just products, but our skills. Really, if we have a very good system where we train our youth with awareness of climate and strategies to deal with climate, then these skilled people could be sent to the rest of the world. As we are now exporting, in fact, English teachers. We are sending English teachers to Korea right now. In fact, to the point where some great English professors here are worried about whether don't we need them back home and so on. So we have a lot of potential to export both services and skills.
So taking the point you referred to before, you said the dry zone is getting dry and the wet zone is getting wetter in Sri Lanka. So is there capacity being built to sort of experiment with temperature resistant, drought resistant seeds and soil and other water management systems and so on and so forth, that might, as you say, eventually lead to a whole export industry? That is, once Sri Lanka becomes sustainable, where Sri Lanka can look at other countries where is prone to climate challenge and start exporting. Are these measures now taken in, started happening?
To some extent, definitely. Most of our universities have research programs in these areas, but research and our government research institutions have research programs as well. But I think the scientists will tell you that research needs good funding. So we need an understanding of the priority, the importance of these research directions, and the adequate funding of this research, and finding opportunities to collaborate in research with great research institutions in other countries. So we could have partnerships between Sri Lankan universities and institutions and similar institutions in, say, Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, US, and so on. And there are now very interesting research funding possibilities in those countries where they are being encouraged, the scientists in those countries, to partner with scientists in developing countries like Sri Lanka. So there's a lot of exciting possibilities to do some really good work, to develop skills, to develop new knowledge, but we need to act. If there's one single word in this whole issue, it is the importance of action as opposed to talking. There's a lot of talk. In fact, the world has been talking about doing something about climate change for the last 30 years. The Brundtland Commission in the 1980s, the Rio Earth Summit in 1992, the Kyoto Protocol meeting in 1997, the Bali meeting a few years ago, and last year the Copenhagen big meeting. All these were talk fests. But if you look at global emissions, it's still hurtling upwards.
But why do you think it is so? What is the reason for the many dialogues and no concrete action?
I think one sad fact is that there is a global denial industry. And this is a very powerful global movement of very conservative people who inherently disbelieve that climate change is happening. And they are so powerful that they have been able to influence the people and governments in power to prevent